Well, Cheryl, on Friday near Vanderbilt University in Nashville, police investigated an unrelated report of a suspicious person pulling on car door handles. When police arrived, they started running tag numbers for potential victims. They found an SUV with a tag number that did not match. U.S. Marshals tell me it was a SUV Richard Merritt took from his mother's home back in February. They had been searching for that vehicle ever since. Marshals say they searched the vehicle and clues that led them to believe for at least the last couple of weeks Merritt had been living and staying in the Nashville area. Marshals tell me they later found out he lived at an apartment with a woman unfamiliar with his criminal background. Marshals also learned Merritt frequented a local restaurant. Yesterday, they staked out the restaurant. They say Merritt walked past them and went into a thrift store. Inside the store, they arrested Merritt, ending a nationwide search.
Once our officers responded, they approached Mr. Merritt and asked him to get on the ground and identify himself, and he responded, "You know who I am."
In January, a Cobb County judge sentenced the now disbarred attorney to 15 years in prison, 15 years on probation for theft and elder exploitation against 17 of his clients. A judge ordered Merritt to turn himself in on February 1st. Instead, he disappeared, and on February 2nd, police found his mother murdered at her DeKalb County home.
This is a case study of somebody who is clinically diagnosed as a narcissist. Now, as we go through this story, we're going to begin with a backstory, but see if you can pick out the traits of a narcissist, of a person who may be a psychopath. His name is Richard Merritt, and Richard Vincent Merritt. He was born in 1974 in Virginia. His father was Robert, who was an Air Force officer, and Shirley, who was a real estate agent. He had an older brother that was Robert II, but they weren't particularly close. Reports say it was probably due to their age gap, and the family moved frequently because of Robert's job with the military. Now, in 1987, Robert Sr. retired from the Air Force and took a high-paying job in Saudi Arabia that improved the family's financial situation considerably. Then he had to move to Georgia for schooling, where his brother lived. We're talking about Richard. So after high school, he pursued political science in college and later earned a law degree in Mississippi. As I was doing background research for the story, what I discovered was that he didn't go to a top-tier law school. In fact, it was a lesser school, which says something about his intellect and the fact that, if I remember correctly, he took the bar exam 3 times before he passed it, maybe more, but I think it was 3 times. So maybe he's not the smartest guy on the planet, but if you can pass the bar exam at all, there is some credibility there. He married someone named Janine, who was studying veterinary medicine at the time. Richard passed his bar exam, as we said, and he began his career as a civil litigator in Georgia. But unfortunately, his father passed away the same year, and that deeply affected his mother, Shirley, who, of course, now was getting on in years as their sons were now adults. So that is the backstory. Now let's take a look at the story itself, and again, see if you can see any traits showing themselves of a person that we could consider to be a narcissist. So you've got Richard and Janine. They have 2 children. And it seems like they were living a life that we would describe as luxurious, and that is thanks by and large to Richard's successful law practice, which reports say was underwritten to some degree by his mother's wealth. So maybe he wasn't that good of an attorney, but what was he good at? Well, it says Richard's desire for more led to a darker path, and he was ultimately arrested and convicted for embezzling about over $400,000 from clients, and, he lost his law license. And along with his law license, he lost his income, and along with his income and law license, he lost his family, and eventually, as we'll see in a second, he lost his freedom. 2019. Richard pled guilty to theft charges and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. That is on the day that he supposedly was going to report to prison. He just disappeared. He vanished. They had no idea where he went. And then they found his ankle bracelet. It was damaged at a gas station, and his mother, Shirley, She was found murdered in the family's home. Now, the story is, as we'll see in a second, Richard testified that he was at home with his mother, which would explain the DNA, but if it was his parents' house, that wouldn't be an issue anyhow. But a story went something like this. Well, he was there with his mother. A couple men knocked on the door and demanded entry, and Richard opened the door and let them in. That to me sounds very suspicious. If two men, strangers, were pounding on my door and demanding entry, I would probably call 911 rather than open the door, but that was his story. So I'm guessing what he was doing is he was trying to establish reasonable doubt because he thought he was going to go to trial, which he did, and ultimately he was convicted. So after being captured in Nashville, Tennessee, where he was living under a fake identity, a news story said that for a long while, he actually lived in his car, which was a nice car. It was his mom's car. He stole his mother's Lexus, and that's what he lived in until he met a woman, and she invited him into her house, apartment, wherever she lived. But during the time that he lived there, he didn't help out with finances, apparently didn't have any. He didn't seem to, according to reports, he didn't seem to help out with anything like cleaning or, keeping the house tidy, cooking, didn't do any of that or very little of it. So that tells us something about his character. So, again, at the murder trial, he testified that two men broke into his house, and mother's house, rather, and he just had to flee for his life because, well, they threatened to kill his family, according to him. Evidence suggested that Shirley had been financially exploited by Richard. I'm guessing she was a soft touch. Does that sound familiar? He owed her over $500,000. So if we do, what is that? $50,000 a year for 10 years on average. I could live on that. I don't think I could live as well as he did, but I could live on that. His story was deemed unconvincing. That's obvious because he was convicted and he was found guilty. Now let's take this story and let's tie it all together. How are you so far? Do you think this has some traits of a narcissist? First of all, we find that Richard's claim of two mysterious intruders doesn't add up. It just doesn't make sense. His actions after the alleged attack and his behavior during the trial are inconsistent with his story. This is one of the problems we have with people who are liars. They have to be consistent all the time. It's virtually impossible. Even when you tell the truth, sometimes you get things wrong. It's hard to tell the truth and be consistent. Financial documents indicate that Richard took advantage of his mother's generosity, owing her that, $500,000, and his lavish lifestyle was just not sustainable. After fleeing to Nashville, Richard adopted, as we said earlier, a different identity, engaged in online dating, and he even found a job. It appears that he was more concerned about his social life than the murder charges. So apparently he wasn't hiding very well and portrayed himself as a victim during the testimony, blaming others for his predicament. Now, I want to stop and remind you that he has a brother who turned out, from what I understand, very well. These are two sons who were raised by the exact same parents, even though they were a few years apart. They were raised in the same home environment and same geography. Everything effectively was the same. That suggests to me that his problems were not his environment. So they must have been, I'm guessing, neurological. I'm just guessing. I don't actually know. So he portrayed himself as a victim, and what I see here is somebody who is impulsive. He is materialistic. He lacks empathy, has no remorse. I mean, he didn't seem to care about his mother, even though his mother took care of him. Ultimately, he killed her. Why? We have no idea. Now, I can only guess, and I'm only guessing, that the The money dried up. She probably said, no, I'm not going to give you any more money. You're going to have to stand on your own 2 feet. And I can understand where you would have kids who are adults who are having a tough time making it, but you would think they would not live a luxurious lifestyle at your expense. That to me makes all the difference. So his mother wound up losing her life. As we said earlier, he also lost his family. Basically, he lost everything. So what is your takeaway of the story? My takeaway is, it appears to me that he's a narcissist. And again, reports say that he was diagnosed and found to be a narcissist, narcissistic disorder. But you can see the traits. He was grandiose in the sense in that he loved to live a luxurious lifestyle. He was self-centered. He had very little empathy. He was manipulative. He was superficial in his charm. He was kind of lazy. He liked to do what we would call couch surfing. In a sense, he lived off his girlfriend in Nashville. All of those traits point to somebody who is narcissistic. So what do we take away from the story? What do we learn from it? We learn as soon as we discover that people are exposing those traits, when the mask rather begins to slip. That is the time to get away. In the lower right-hand corner, there is a circle. If you click on that, you can become a subscriber to our YouTube channel, join our family. Click the bell for notifications. Lower left-hand corner, there is a rectangle. If you click on that, you can listen to our back videos, past videos. As long as you desire. We will see you all next time.